everybody, and welcome to Museum Munchkins. I'm Mr. Nick, and today we are talking all about bald eagles. And we're going to start off today by singing a song about eagles if you want to stand up on your feet. Great. So this song is called Little Eagle, and it sounds a little bit like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Do you know that song? So this song is called Little Eagle, though, and we're going to learn some motions to do with this song while we sing it, and then we'll follow along really slowly at first so we can learn those motions, and then we'll go a little bit faster at like a normal speed and see if we can follow along with the actions. Are you ready? Great. So this song goes like this. Little eagle, fly around. So we're going to fly around. Can you stretch out your arms really wide like they're wings of an eagle? Up to the sky, and so we're going to fly up really high and down to the ground. And we'll fly down really low with our wings. Very good. Little eagle, flap your wings. So can we flap our wings up and down like this? Very good. Open your beak and sweetly sing. Do you know what sound a bald eagle makes? They kind of make a sound. Can you try doing that? Yeah, they kind of sound a little bit silly, but that's okay. And then, little eagle, fly to your nest. So for this part, we're going to fly in a circle like this, like we're flying down to our nest. Now it's time to take a rest. And then we'll put our hands on the side of our face like that, like we're going to take a rest. All right. Do you think we can follow along with all of those motions through this song? Let's try singing it all the way through one time really slowly and see if we can follow along. Are you ready? Little eagle, fly around. Fly up to the sky and down to the ground. Very good. Little eagle, flap your wings. Can we flap our wings? Open your beak and sweetly sing. Little eagle, fly to your nest. Remember, we'll fly in a circle. Now it's time to take a rest. Very good. Let's try singing it through all the way through this time. Are you ready? Little eagle, fly around, up to the sky and down to the ground. Little eagle, flap your wings. Open your beak and sweetly sing. Little eagle, fly to your nest. Now it's time to take a rest. Very good. Let's sing it one more time. And this time, when we get to the end and it's time for us to fly to our nest, let's fly in a circle and then find a seat, all right? Little eagle, fly around, up to the sky and down to the ground. Little eagle, flap your wings. Open your beak and sweetly sing. Little eagle, fly to your nest. Let's fly in a circle. And now it's time to take a rest. Very good. Excellent job dancing along with that song, you guys. I'm going to put my guitar away so we can talk all about this bald eagle. All right. Have any of you ever seen a real live bald eagle before? Well, if you live here in North America, you might have before. So here's North America. That's where the United States is and where the Kenosha Public Museum is here in Wisconsin. And we find bald eagles all throughout North America, throughout the United States, and up into Canada and Alaska, and even down into parts of Mexico we find bald eagles. So they're really big, powerful birds of prey that live near bodies of water. They really like living near water, like the ocean or lakes or rivers. They really like where there's water that they can live by. In fact, even up north in northern Wisconsin, there's a pair of bald eagles who live on a lake right by my grandparents' house. So sometimes when I go to visit them, I can listen or I can even watch for the bald eagles that live near their house way up north in Wisconsin. But bald eagles, even though they're called bald eagles, if we look on their head, they're not actually bald. That bald name just means that they have those white feathers on their head. So the rest of their body is covered in these dark brown feathers, and with those bright white feathers on their head, it kind of makes them look like they're bald or they don't have any of those dark brown feathers on their head, and that's because they don't. Those brown feathers cover their body, and they have white feathers on their head and on their tail are covered in these really bright white feathers. Now, bald eagles don't always look like this. When they're younger, bald eagles are mostly covered in brown feathers. They have brown feathers all over their body with little bits of white here and there. But even their head and their bright white tail are brown when they're younger. And as they get older, when they get really big and they get older as adults, then their heads and their tails turn that white color that we're so used to seeing. And bald eagles, even though I'm a lot bigger than this bald eagle, right? Bald eagles for birds are enormous flying birds. And if you've ever seen one, in real life, up close, you might have seen just how big a bald eagle is. So bald eagles, if we stretch out our arms like this, we can see what our wingspan is, how wide apart we can spread our arms. We call that our wingspan, just even though we don't have wings. But a bald eagle's wingspan, how big they can stretch out their wings, is about between 5 and 8 feet wide. That's really, really, really big. And their bodies are about 2 to 3 feet tall. So they're not very tall if we think about other animals, or if we think about like humans like me or like you. 2 to 3 feet tall isn't that big, but with an 8-foot wingspan, their wings are really, really big. And if you've got a tape measure or a ruler at home, you can measure and see just how big you are compared to a bald eagle. You can stand really straight and measure how tall you are and see if you're taller than a bald eagle. And then you could spread out your arms like this, or you could even lay down and spread your arms out like this and have someone else measure how long it is from the tip of one finger to the tip of the fingers on your other hand and see how big your wingspan is. I bet it's not as big as a bald eagle, because even though I'm a lot taller than a bald eagle, even my wingspan is only about 6 feet. So bald eagles are about 2 feet wider with their wings than my arms can get stretched out. They're really, really big birds. And usually, there's that difference in them. So I said 5 to 8 feet for their wingspan, or 2 to 3 feet for their height. But that's because bald eagles can come in different sizes. And usually, it's the girls who are a lot bigger and a lot stronger than the boys. And we find that actually is the case with most dinosaurs. And because bald eagles are dinosaurs, did you know that? Yeah, they're a member of the group of the only dinosaurs who are left on our planet. So really interesting. Do you know any really big, strong girls in your life? I know a lot of really strong girls. My sister-in-law can lift a lot of weight because she practices lifting weights in her free time. So she's a really strong girl that I know. Do you know any girls like that? Yeah, and so because bald eagles are so big, can you see just how big they are? They have to live in a really big nest. So the nest of a bald eagle is usually anywhere from 8 to 13 feet across, and they usually weigh around 2,000 pounds. That's a huge nest and lots of sticks. And they build their nests still, just like other birds, way up in the tops of trees. So they have to find a really strong tree that can hold those big, giant nests that they make. And bald eagles, like I said at the very beginning, are called birds of prey, or raptors, sometimes people call them too. Can you say that word? Raptor. Yeah, so birds of prey, or raptors, are birds that only eat other animals. So they're really good predators. They're really good at hunting other animals. And bald eagles really love to eat fish like trout, but they also will eat smaller mammals, things like rabbits and raccoons. They even might sometimes eat other birds like ducks and seagulls. Because bald eagles are so big in the environment where they live, they really don't have any other predators. So they're what we call an apex predator, which means there aren't any predators in the food chain above them. There's no animals that hunt and eat bald eagles because they're just too big and they're just too strong. And they fly really high when they're flying around looking for their food. Bald eagles can be found up as high as 10,000 feet above the ground, looking down with their excellent eyes. Can you find your eyes? Where are they? Here are my eyes. They can use their excellent eyes to watch for food on the ground, running around on the ground, or swimming in the water with their excellent eyes from that high up. And bald eagles are really important. I thought it was important and would be fun to talk about them this week especially, because do you know what's coming up at the end of this week? Yeah, so you might know that this Saturday is the 4th of July, the Independence Day for the United States, and bald eagles are actually the nation's symbol for the United States. So lots of countries have a symbol or an animal or something that they use to recognize their country, and the bald eagle is the symbol for our country, the United States. So I thought it'd be really important for us to talk about them. And in fact, I brought a story today about one really important eagle who lived a long time ago. And this is a story called The Legend of Old Abe, a Civil War Eagle. And while we read this story, if you have any questions about bald eagles, you can type them into the comments, and we're going to answer some in a little bit while we're doing our craft. But first, let's read our story all about Old Abe, the Civil War Eagle. I borrowed this from my friends over at the Civil War Museum. Long ago, in the big woods of Wisconsin, Daniel McCann and his wife greeted a visitor named Chief Sky. He was from the Lac du Flambeau band of Indians and traveling to Chippewa Falls with a load of goods to trade. In exchange for a bushel of corn, Chief Sky gave the McCann family a young bald eagle that had been captured near the Flambeau River. It was not much larger than a fat hen, and its feathers were the color of dull brown mud. Even so, the eaglet delighted the McCann children very much. So you can see how this eagle doesn't look quite like a bald eagle yet, because it's still young, so it doesn't have its white feathers. During the day, the children went in search of rabbits and mice for the young eagle's food. In the evenings, when Mr. McCann played lively tunes on his fiddle, it hopped around and spread its wings as if dancing to the music. The McCanns adored their new pet, and they gave the bird a good home. But times were changing. It was 1861, and Abraham Lincoln had recently been elected President of the United States of America. This was a time when northern and southern parts of the country had different ideas about how to be governed. The southern states created a Confederate army, while northern states created a Union army, and soon the two armies were fighting each other in a war between the states. Folks from Wisconsin began to volunteer for the Union Army, and Mr. McCann wanted to do his part. Because he was crippled and didn't believe he would make a good soldier, he decided to send the Eagle in his place. The young bird in tow, Mr. McCann set off to Eau Claire, where a group of volunteer soldiers calling themselves the Eau Claire Badgers were organizing for the Union Army. These men came from all over Wisconsin. They were lumberjacks, blacksmiths, carpenters, and farmers. These men liked the new recruit instantly, and as they were sworn into military service, the Eagle was proudly beside them. Afterward, the men changed their name to the Eau Claire Eagles and named their new mascot Old Abe in honor of President Abraham Lincoln. The Eau Claire Eagles traveled to Camp Randall in Madison to join other soldiers and form the 8th Regiment of Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry. People lined the streets to greet them with cheers and banners, and music filled the air. Old Abe was so excited by the celebration that he stretched his wings and grasped a corner of the flag in his beak. Now at camp, the men learned how to be soldiers. As they practiced their drills, Old Abe practiced too. He seemed to like the soldier chosen to be his eagle bearer and happily sat upon the perch made especially for him. And whenever the bugle called, Old Abe snapped his head to attention, just like his fellow soldiers. Ready for duty, the Eagle Regiment began to march southward through the countryside. Along the way, people came to see the brigade that carried the Eagle, and Old Abe seemed to enjoy the attention very much. There were quiet times. Between battles and marches to new locations, the Eagle Regiment would set up camp and remain for long periods of time. Away from families and sleeping in tents with few comforts of home, life in an army camp was not easy. But even so, they always took good care of Old Abe, giving him good food to eat, safe place to sleep, and plenty of attention. During these times, Old Abe kept the soldiers entertained by tipping over water pails, chasing bugs, and sneaking into their tents. One time, the Eagle flew into the laundry as it was hanging out to dry, causing the men to break into laughter. Another time, Old Abe stole a fresh chicken from the kitchen tent and led the cook on a chase all throughout camp. One private wrote home to say, "All the brigade adore Old Abe." Another wrote, "Our Eagle is the pet of the whole regiment. All think as much of him as we do our colonel, and that is saying a great deal." Old Abe's fame continued to grow throughout the Union troops. When generals or other important officers visited camp, they always tipped their hat to the Eagle, causing the entire brigade to cheer. And when this happened, Old Abe greeted them in return by spreading his wings and letting out his best eagle cry. The Battle of Corinth began with a siege of fire. The Confederate soldiers fired fast and steady, aiming at Old Abe. The battlefield quickly became a frenzy of sound and smoke as the soldiers fought. Bullets grazed Old Abe, and his piercing cries could barely be heard above the sounds of war. In an instant, one bullet came his way, snapping the cord that tethered him to the perch carried by the eagle bearer. Now free, Old Abe did not fly away. Instead, he flew straight into the heat of battle. With wings spread wide, he soared low over his troops and toward the Confederate line, encouraging every Union soldier. From that day on, newspapers wrote stories about Old Abe and his fight into battle. It was not long before Old Abe became a hero among men and women and a legend throughout the country. Old Abe served with the Eagle Regiment for 3 years, side by side with the troops during 37 skirmishes. The Eagle was never wounded. In that time, Old Abe had grown from a small brown bird to a handsome eagle with a glorious crown of white. In September of 1864, it was time to let old Abe retire from duty, and so he was presented to Governor James T. Lewis. Knowing how important the eagle had become, Lewis said he was proud to accept old Abe and to care for him always. And when the Civil War came to an end in the spring of 1865, old Abe attended conventions and fairs to raise money for sick and wounded soldiers. For many years, he worked as an honored symbol of our nation's freedom. People would line up for hours to have their picture taken with him. It was a sad day when old Abe died in 1881, but even though the eagle was gone, his story remained in the hearts of those who loved him. Because of this, old Abe, the eagle from Wisconsin, will remain a legend forever. The end. That's a pretty interesting story, and my favorite part about this story is that it's a true story. Old Abe was really an eagle who was really in the Civil War a long time ago. I think that that's really interesting. Now, we've got a special craft to do today, but first I'm going to need to move my eagle off my cart so I have a little more space to do our activity. And I've got your questions right here that we're going to answer while we do our craft today. So for today's craft, we're going to need just a couple things. We're going to need a pair of scissors, a marker, a glue stick, a little piece of yellow paper, or if you don't want to use a piece of yellow paper this small or you don't have one, you could just use some yellow crayons or colored pencils or markers too. We're going to need a piece of white paper, and we're going to need 2 pieces of brown paper. All right, and we're going to start off our activity today, our craft today, with one of our pieces of brown paper. And the first thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to trace our hands onto our brown paper. So I'm going to hold my hand like this, and I'm not going to spread my fingers out very much. You can if you want to on yours, but I think I'm going to kind of keep mine all closer together like this when I trace mine. And while I trace my hand, I'm going to trace both of my hands, okay, so I can have 2 wings for my eagle. And while we do that, let's answer some questions, because Ollie wants to know how fast a bald eagle can fly. That is a very good question. So bald eagles don't fly as fast as some other birds like peregrine falcons who can fly over 200 miles an hour, but they can still fly pretty fast. Not super fast, but like 50, 60 miles an hour. So about as fast as you can drive your car on the highway. They fly a little bit faster when they're diving down from way up in the sky to grab food, but they don't usually fly that fast all the time, because they usually fly pretty slow so that they can look over the land or over the water very carefully with their eyes and look for food that they might want to catch. All right, so I've got both of my hands traced on my brown paper now, and now I'm going to use my scissors to cut those out. Those hands are going to be my eagle's wings. And while I cut these out, let's answer another question. Cecilia wants to know if they live in trees. Yes, so a bald eagle, they make their nests way up in trees, just like a lot of birds do. That really, really big nest that we talked about that can be up to 2,000 pounds of sticks, they make their nests pretty high up in the trees. So they have to find good, strong, sturdy trees for them to build their nests in. But they do live up in trees. Absolutely. And Noelle wants to know if eagles eat fish. Yes. So because bald eagles they're actually a special group of eagles called sea eagles, which means that they live near water, like we talked about. So they like to live near the ocean or rivers or ponds or lakes, places where they can find fish, because fish is really the food that they like to eat the most. But they will eat other animals too, like we talked about, like raccoons and rabbits and mice if they can catch them. Snakes, pretty much anything that's small that they can grab with their big long talons and they can fit into their beaks. They'll eat that stuff. All right, so I've got my 2 wings cut out. Put my scraps over here. So there, I've got my 2 wings now. Perfect. So I'm going to set these to the side for right now while I take my other piece of brown paper now, and now I need to make my eagle's body. And so with my marker, I'm going to draw sort of kind of like a egg shape. This is because eagles kind of have like a round body. And I need to make it big because bald eagles are big birds. So I'm going to make a big kind of round egg shape with my markers for me to cut out. Just like this. There we go. And now let's cut this out. And Ollie also wants to know if they have good eyesight. Yes, so eagles and other birds of prey, other raptors, like hawks and falcons, have very, very good eyesight. So you might have even heard sometimes, if you're really good at spotting something, you might have heard somebody say that you're eagle-eyed because you have such good eyesight like an eagle. Because eagles and other birds of prey have really strong eyesight because their eyes both point forward, just like our eyes point forward. So they have what we call binocular vision. But actually, eagles have even better eyes than us because inside an eagle's eyes is a little tiny ring of bones. They have bones inside their eyeballs, and those bones let their eyeballs kind of squish and stretch like this just a little bit. That helps them to kind of zoom in and out with their eyes and change how far their eyes can see. So they have really, really good eyes for seeing the food and things that they want to eat. All right, now I need to make my eagle's head too. So I'm going to use my marker again on my white piece of paper, and I'm going to draw kind of like a broken egg shape this time. So I'm going to kind of draw a round shape on the top, like this. That's going to be my eagle's head. But then I'm going to kind of draw like that so it looks kind of like an egg that got cracked in half and it's missing the other top part of it. So I'm going to draw that for his head. And then I think my eagle needs a tail too. So on my same piece of white paper, I'm going to draw an eagle tail with some feathers like this. And I'm going to cut those pieces out for my eagle. And who knows, maybe because it's 4th of July this weekend, maybe I'll hang up my eagle in the window, the front window of my house, so everyone can see my eagle in my neighborhood. Just like people would come by to see old Abe in that story. They would go to the soldiers' camps and they would see old Abe. Maybe people will come by my house to see my eagle that's hanging up in my window. And you can do that too. If when you're finished making your eagle, you can hang it up in your window for everyone to see. Okay, I've got that cut out, and I need to cut out my tail. And Joanna wants to know, what age do bald eagles get their white heads? That is a very good question. So it depends on, kind of depends on the eagle, but most eagles, bald eagles, get their white feathers around the age of 3 or 4. Sometimes they can be a little bit older than that, but even that sounds pretty old, doesn't it? For them to, a pretty long time for them to not have those brown feathers, or to not have those bright white feathers on them, but they can live for a lot longer after they get those feathers too. So they usually get them around 3 or 4 years old, and then they can live to be, like old Abe lived to be about 20 years old, but he was fed really well because people took care of him. So he lived a little bit longer than lots of eagles do. All right, and I've got one more thing I need to cut out, and that's my beak for my eagle. And eagles kind of have a long, sharp, pointy beak, which I think I'm going to draw my eagle's beak from the side. So you can see the big hook that he has on his beak. So just kind of like this. And I'm going to cut this out for the beak on my eagle. They use that long, sharp beak to kind of pull their food apart into long, thin strips before they eat it. So it will fit down their throat because since eagles are birds, they don't have teeth and they can't chew their food up like we do, so they have to swallow their food whole. All right, and now I've just got to put everything together. So I'm going to use my glue stick and put all of my things together. So I think first I'm going to take my body and I'm going to glue the wings on the sides of my eagle's body. And while we glue this all together, let's answer another question. So Al has heard that eagles have both telescopic and microscopic vision. Is that true? That's a good question, Al. Yeah, so like we said before about how eagles have those bones inside their eyes, that allows them to change the actual shape of their eyeball, or what we call the focal point of their eye. So it allows them to focus on things that are further away or a lot closer, depending on what kind of shape they've made their eyeball. So they kind of have that telescopic and microscopic vision, but microscopic, they can't see things that are really, really small, like germs and stuff. They can't see things that are that small, but they can see things that are pretty close to them, and they can zoom in on things a little bit with their eyes. But that's usually to help them to see things that are really far away. All right, I've got my wings and my tail on. Now I've just got to add my eagle's head. So I'm going to add a little bit of glue to the top of his body here and stick on his head. And then that long, sharp beak I need to glue on right in the middle of my eagle's head. Ooh, and I'm going to add, I almost forgot, I think I'm going to use my marker then to give my eagle some eyes, because we've been talking so much about an eagle's sharp vision. I'm going to give my eagles some eyes. And eagles kind of look a little bit like they're grumpy all the time, because the feathers above their eyes kind of make their eyes go down like they're being a little bit grumpy. So I'm going to make my eagle look like he's a little bit grumpy. All right, and there we go. I used my hands to make some wings, and I made this cool bald eagle that I can hang up at my house to help me celebrate the 4th of July this weekend. I hope that you guys make some eagles too to hang up around your house, and then you can share those pictures with us right here on our Facebook or on our Instagram. You can find us there at Kenosha Museums. And I hope that you come back and join us next week when we're going to be learning all about flies. You probably have seen flies buzzing around your house. We're going to talk all about flies next week. Thank you guys so much for visiting with us today, and we'll see you next week.